In a peaceful beach house, we meet a family carrying the weight of unspoken grief. Ted, a successful author, lives with his wife Marion and their young daughter Ruth, but beneath the surface of their seemingly idyllic life lies a heartbreaking story: the loss of their two sons Tom and Timmy in a tragic accident years ago. While Ruth and her father often pause to look at the family photos adorning their walls, Marion remains trapped in a prison of her own sorrow, unable to move past the devastating loss of her boys. The once vibrant mother now walks through life like a shadow of her former self. The family relies on their babysitter Alice to help care for Ruth, who, like her mother, finds comfort in gazing at pictures of her brothers, keeping their memory alive. When Ted's driving license gets suspended, he brings on a young assistant named Eddie to help with errands and daily tasks. One evening, during a conversation by the shoreline, Ted and Marion face the growing distance between them. Their marriage, strained by grief and silence, seems to be crumbling like sand between their fingers. When Ted suggests they need time apart, Marion quietly agrees, choosing to retreat to a hotel in the city. The arrival of Eddie, Ted's new assistant, might shake things up in ways none of them could have anticipated. Late one night, little Ruth wakes up trembling from a nightmare. Finding comfort in her father's presence, she listens as Ted weaves a soothing bedtime story, helping her drift back to sleep. The next morning brings an unexpected encounter when Ted asks Marion to pick up his new assistant. When Eddie first lays eyes on Marion, he's instantly captivated by her elegant beauty, despite their significant age difference. After dropping Eddie at the beach house, Marion returns to her temporary home at the hotel, leaving the young assistant to begin his new role. Eddie, we learn, isn't just any assistant. He's an aspiring writer who deeply admires Ted's work. His enthusiasm shines through as Ted shows him around the house, even as Ted opens up about his struggling marriage and current separation from Marion. A few days later, Ted and Ruth spend a day at the hotel, trying to maintain some semblance of family normalcy. Meanwhile, back at the beach house, Eddie meets Alice, Ruth's kind-hearted babysitter. We also discover another side of Ted. He's not just an author, but also an artist who paints sensual portraits of women. He even hires a young model named Evelyn to pose for his latest work. Marion visits the beach house, unaware that Eddie would later follow her to the theater. During their chance encounter, Eddie mentions that Ted doesn't provide meals at home, a revelation that prompts Marion to extend a dinner invitation. Eddie's growing fascination with Marion becomes increasingly apparent. After a close call when Ted and Ruth return home unexpectedly, Eddie finds himself drawn to follow Marion to the beach the next day, watching her from afar like a scene from a romantic film. A pivotal moment occurs when Marion discovers Eddie in an embarrassing situation at home. Instead of anger, she responds with unexpected understanding, acknowledging it as a natural part of youth. When Eddie confesses how strongly her presence affects him, Marion's silence speaks volumes about her own conflicted feelings. The next day, after Eddie returns from dropping Ted at Evelyn's house, he notices what seems to be an intentional gesture from Marion. That evening marks a turning point as they share dinner together, engaging in meaningful conversation that goes far beyond small talk. When the topic turns to Eddie's love life, particularly regarding Alice, he admits there's no connection there. Their relationship takes a more intimate turn when Marion visits Eddie's room the following day. As she shares the stories behind the family photos on the walls, we see her gradually opening up, revealing layers of her life's journey. The physical distance between them shrinks as they spend time together. At a small literary gathering, Eddie gains a deeper understanding of Ted's work as he listens to him read to an intimate audience of 10. The realization strikes him. Ted's stories aren't just fiction, but mirror his own life experiences. On their drive home, Ted unexpectedly opens up to Eddie, expressing gratitude for how Marion seems happier since Eddie's arrival. But their delicate balance shatters one night when little Ruth walks in on her mother and Eddie in an intimate moment. The child's confusion erupts into tears, while Marion desperately tries to soothe her, insisting everything is fine. The next day brings a chilling conversation in the car when Ted confronts Eddie about the affair. Instead of anger, Ted's response is calculated. He wants Eddie to testify in his favor during the inevitable divorce, hoping to gain custody of Ruth. This manipulation prompts Eddie to question Marion about her continued marriage to Ted. Marion's answer reveals layers of complexity in her relationship with Ted. While acknowledging his qualities as a father to Ruth, she exposes her deep discomfort with his artistic obsessions. Her voice fills with old pain as she recalls the early days of their marriage, when Ted painted intimate portraits of her, artwork that still haunts her today. The revelation shows how their marriage has been unraveling long before Eddie's arrival. A simple moment of Eddie showing Ruth family pictures turns tragic when the little girl accidentally cuts her finger on broken glass. The incident sparks Ted's fury, but it's what happens later that night that truly changes everything. When Ruth wakes, screaming from another nightmare, Ted's attempts to comfort her fail. Only Marion's gentle presence can calm their daughter's fears. In this moment, Ted witnesses a truth he can't ignore. Ruth needs her mother more than she needs him. The next day brings a heart-wrenching scene as Marion breaks down crying during her time with Eddie. Through her tears, she reveals her plan to escape her current life, dreaming of a fresh start somewhere far away. Meanwhile, Ted asks Eddie to return Evelyn's paintings, signaling his own readiness for change. But when Eddie delivers them, Evelyn's angry reaction comes with a demand. Ted must face her personally on Friday. This leads to Marion's master plan, which she shares with Eddie in hushed tones that evening. Her scheme is simple but desperate. When Eddie takes Ted to Evelyn's on Friday, he's to leave Ted there. This would give Marion the precious time she needs to gather the most important pieces of her past, all the photographs of her beloved sons, before disappearing forever. What's fascinating is how each character's pain and hope intertwine in this moment. A mother planning her escape, a father letting go, and a young man caught in the middle of this family's transformation. The plan unfolds as Eddie drives Ted to Evelyn's house, where chaos erupts. In a stunning display of rage, Evelyn destroys Ted's paintings before wielding a knife at him. Eddie slips away, leaving Ted to face the consequences of his past. Meanwhile, Marion orchestrates her escape by sending Ruth to the doctor with Eddie, knowing her daughter's presence would make leaving impossible. The situation spirals as Evelyn, consumed by madness, attempts to run Ted over with her car. Ted flees to the beach, while Eddie, thinking ahead, stops to repair Ruth's broken picture. Seeking refuge, Ted finds himself in a bookstore where his fans provide an unexpected escape. Two young admirers catch his attention, and instead of heading home, they take him to their house where Ted, ever the artist, offers to paint them. Fate plays a cruel trick when Ted returns home earlier than planned, just in time to witness Marion's departure. In a moment heavy with unspoken words, he watches silently as she leaves for New York, taking with her every photograph of their sons. When Eddie returns with Ruth, the tension explodes. Ted, consumed by anger, slaps Eddie, who retaliates with a punch to Ted's nose, exactly as Marion had instructed. The aftermath brings more upheaval, as Alice, unable to handle Ruth's distress, quits her position as babysitter. In a final, poignant moment, Ted shares the tragic story of his son's accident with Eddie, despite having just fired him. It's as if the house itself holds too many ghosts now, memories of two lost sons, and the fresh absence of a mother who couldn't bear the weight of staying. Finally, Ted reveals the devastating truth behind their family's tragedy. On what should have been a joyful night out, the family had been celebrating at a beachside restaurant. The air was filled with laughter and wine, none of them anticipating the darkness that lay ahead. Their eldest son, eager to prove himself, insisted on driving despite his limited experience behind the wheel. Ted and Marion, their judgment clouded by alcohol, made the fatal mistake of agreeing. Under the moonlit sky, their car swerved on the highway, colliding head-on with a truck. In that single moment, both Tom and Timmy were gone forever, leaving behind a void that would haunt their parents eternally. Ted's voice breaks as he explains how Ruth came into their lives, a desperate attempt to fill the endless silence in their home, to heal the wounds that seemed unhealable. But even the innocent laughter of a new baby couldn't erase the ghosts of their past. Eddie sits in stunned silence, the weight of this revelation crushing his chest. He struggles to reconcile the Marion he knows, passionate, complex, alive, with a mother who could walk away from her surviving child. Yet perhaps her departure was the final act of a tragedy that began that fateful night, a story of how grief can both unite and divide. Just as the household seems to be crumbling under the weight of loss and abandonment, fate offers an unexpected gift. A knock at the door brings Evelyn's former servant, bearing news of his own dismissal. In this moment of shared displacement, Ted sees a chance for redemption. He hires the man as his new driver, and in a stroke of serendipity, discovers the man's wife is experienced in childcare and cooking. As the story draws to a close, we witness the emergence of an unconventional family born from the ashes of tragedy. The servant couple brings warmth back into the beach house, their genuine care for Ruth healing old wounds in unexpected ways. While one mother seeks solace in distance, another steps in to provide the nurturing presence Ruth so desperately needs. In the end, we're left with a bittersweet reminder that sometimes families aren't built by blood alone, but by the people who choose to stay and love despite life's deepest sorrows. The beach house, once a monument to loss, slowly transforms into a sanctuary of new beginnings.